Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is that you are listening to us here on Hoops Talk with Dave. I'm your host, Dave Smith, here on January the 12th. And like I mentioned previously, we've got some special episodes coming on the way. The first one being today. We've got episode 1 of Fast Break Brunch here with special guest Tanner Marlar. Tanner, how are you doing on this fine Sunday morning?
I'm excellent, Dave. I'm excellent. I'm excited for some fast break brunch. That'll be an insider for the listeners. Maybe they'll pick that up. I'm a little gutted after watching a certain game last night, but we're here. We're having a good time. We're here to talk college basketball.
Yeah, and college basketball is insane. And I think we saw a lot of insane games yesterday, one of them, of course, being our Mississippi State Bulldogs, and it was unfortunate how they went down. But why don't we just start at the top of the SEC here, as we're going to take you through all of the SEC today and kind of where they look at each team top to bottom. And because this conference is, I think we can both agree, the greatest conference in our lifetimes and potentially the greatest conference in the history of college basketball.
It's the best I've ever seen the SEC, certainly. Now, there were some years in the 90s where there were some really good SEC teams, but it wasn't this good top to bottom. And that's where I think you're seeing the impact, and I think you're seeing it in college football as well. NIL and everything kind of level the playing field. And in basketball, a sport where the bar for entry is a lot lower to the higher ranks as far as money spent and everything like that. I think you're seeing the schools that have a lot of resources like that climb to the top.
Yeah, and it's incredible for the overall sport of college basketball because I think we've seen it. There's been more, obviously, postseason wise. You've had a 16 beat a 1 multiple times. You're having that happen, and so stuff like that. I don't think it would have ever happened in the 80s or 90s. Obviously, it didn't. But the gap between a 1 seed and a 16 seed, talent wise, is way smaller now than it was back then. And I think that overall is just great for the sport.
Yeah, I mean, when all of this started, back, gosh, it's crazy to think it only started about 2 or 3 years ago, and we're so enthralled in it now. But back when all of this started, I thought, in football, I thought it would level the playing field a bit with the transfer portal and everything like that, and it has. We've seen it in college football playoff. It's ongoing right now, and I really think we're seeing it in basketball because obviously you still got your Titans out in the Big East, but the ACC, obviously they have their top dogs, and I think it's a down year for them overall, but I think they'll bounce back, and they're going to have some really good teams, and SEC has just absolutely capitalized. The recruiting footprint for all the SEC schools has gone out the door. Right? You're not recruiting locally anymore. We were talking before we came on about Mississippi State. They got a 4-star center who played for OTE in Atlanta, but then is also from LA. Back 20 years ago, Mississippi State's not getting a basketball player from Los Angeles. It's not happening. But now in this era of recruiting, it's possible. And I think that's good for the sport and all the schools in any conference, top to bottom.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I think another thing you're seeing here with NIL and also the transfer portal is so different. I think we've seen a lot of coaches, and I believe Chris Jans said it, I don't remember if it was before this season started or before last season or during last season, but it's no longer about building a program necessarily, but you're building a new team year in, year out, and you've got to
build a roster.
You're building a roster each year, and it's crazy the amount of talent you can add or lose depending upon who you are every offseason. Like there's a lack of consistency overall. I think that leads to teams who could have been way outside the tournament one year to being a top 4 seed the next year, just like that.
Well, and it's interesting to me because the team we're about to talk about has done all of this without any huge transfers coming in the offseason, and Auburn, right? I mean, obviously Auburn been good for quite a while. They have. But it seems like since Jabari Smith left, they've gotten better. And now Johni Broome, obviously, he's going to be out for a little bit with an ankle injury after last night. But Johni Broome's playing the best basketball in the country. And that's against guys like Cooper Flagg and everybody else. But they're doing it with a lot more homegrown talent. Chad Baker-Mazar has been there for a minute. Johni Broome has been there for a minute. And that's their big 1-2 punch. And that's That's fascinating to me, really.
Yeah, Auburn. I mean, they've got. I think they have the best coach in all of college basketball, in my opinion, in Bruce Pearl. But yeah, you're right. Janai Broome has been insane. I think as long as he doesn't miss too much time with his ankle injury, he should be the runaway for the Naismith Player of the Year, without a doubt. But you're right. They've got a ton of players who is just so much talent on this team from top to bottom. And I think the unsung hero for this team so far, and I think what you'll see from Auburn is a lot more Tahad Pettiford. I think you'll see him get closer to averaging maybe even 20 points a game in the absence of Janai Broome. And he's someone that's going to go in the lottery in the NBA draft next year. Even as a freshman, I think without a doubt, the Auburn Tigers are going to be led by Tahad Pettiford without Janai Broome there. And I know that's big to say when you've got Chad Baker-Mazara there, but I really like Tahad, and I like him to continue to carry Auburn without Janai.
I think obviously without Janai, the shot volume is going to go up. Obviously, I don't know if it's going to go up more than Baker Mazara because I know Pearl loves Chad Baker Mazara. So I'm interested to see that kind of dynamic play out because Mazara is kind of the number 2 option right now. If he continues to be that number 2 option behind Pettiford, I think it could be an interesting choice from Pearl. I think it just depends on who they want to run the offense through. And maybe that's matchup driven, maybe that's scenario driven, but it's going to be interesting to watch. And obviously, we get to see them very soon.
That's right. Auburn, next game will be on Tuesday. And we haven't gotten any official injury word on Janai Broome yet. But I think as of right now, of course, with Tennessee losing this past week, Auburn is going to be the AP number 1 team. I think when healthy, and maybe even when not healthy, this is by far the best team, not only in the SEC, but in all of college basketball. Am I wrong for saying that at all?
No, I agree. I mean, you look out at the big teams like the UConns, the Dukes, the guys that, you're picking to make a Final Four, make an Elite Eight. I think Auburn's just a more physical team, and I think playing in a physical league like the SEC is only going to compound that kind of benefit for them. I do think they're going to be the number 1 team. Without Janai Broome, I'm skeptic, but I think they could very well still be a top 10 team without Janai Broome.
Yeah, and that goes to show what an incredible program that Bruce Pearl has built there. And they overall, there's a lot of SEC teams that haven't lost on their home floor, and that I think one of the most underrated things throughout all of college basketball is playing away from home, how tough that is. And there's no sport, in my opinion, that it's tougher to play away from home than college basketball. I don't think that you can go professional, you can go collegiate, doesn't matter. College basketball is the toughest to go into a road environment and win. But props to Auburn for putting together the season they have so far and moving to their in-state rival, who I think is currently the second best team in the SEC, in the Alabama Crimson Tide. And this is another great coach. I think he's a top 5 coach in college basketball, in Nate Oates, because he plays, I feel like he's a lot more analytics driven, a lot more 3-point driven, playing from the outside in versus where Auburn will get up and they'll play a lot more physical with you on the inside. But Mark Sears, he started off this year kind of down, on a down tilt, but recently, he has turned back into a first-team All-American. He's got this Crimson Tide team in a great spot to get a 1 seed come March.
Well, not only Sears, but I think Grant Nelson obviously plays a huge part in that. And it was huge to get him back for Nate Oates. I know there wasn't a whole lot of talk about him going to the league, but I knew that it was a possibility, and I know for a fact NBA teams are very rarely going to pass up on a 7-footer that can handle it and shoot it like Grant Nelson can. But yeah, him and Sears are a dynamic 1-2 kind of punch. Nelson gets hurt a lot, and I don't mean injury-wise. I mean, when someone like a Tolu Smith plays him, people remember last year, Tolu Smith put the man in a blender. You can out-physical Grant Nelson, but when Mark Sears is playing his best basketball, it's tough.
Oh, yeah. And this team from top to bottom, even with the loss of Latrell Wrightsall Jr. earlier this year, who was going to be an incredible player for them this season, they still have picked up right where they left off. And I think he will be incredible for them next year. No doubt about it. And I think something that's kind of going on the radar as well is when you talk about the dynamic between Auburn and Alabama, one of the players that was counted on a lot last year for Auburn was Aiden Holloway. And then this offseason, he flipped the script, transferred to Alabama because he wasn't very efficient at Auburn. But now he stepped into this role in Alabama where he is just very comfortable, playing incredibly well, extremely efficient. And I think he could really become an unsung hero for this team throughout the season as we get into the grind of the SEC. Someone like that playing that efficient is going to be the difference maker in a lot of close SEC games.
I was going to say, he's played a lot of big minutes. He's played a lot of big postseason minutes. And like you said, a little inefficient at Auburn. You hoped he would take a step this offseason, and he did. And that's exactly what you want of your Nate Oates.
Moving up to the Orange, the Volunteers of Tennessee. They were the AP number 1 team before playing another top 10 SEC team earlier this week in Florida. But this Tennessee team, Rick Barnes, I mean, I feel like I'm beating the dead horse here talking about how.
Are you telling me Rick Barnes blew another number 1 ranking? Say it ain't so.
I mean, he might do it again. He will probably have another opportunity to do it another time this year. There's no doubt about it.
He probably will. Look, I think Tennessee has got all the talent in the world. Rick Barnes is a wonderful recruiter and is a really solid basketball coach. I find that he gets out coached in a lot of these games regularly. And that should be a red flag for Tennessee. Obviously it's tough to part ways with a guy like that, but it's the truth. I mean, Tennessee seems like whenever they get in these really big moments in these really big positions, it tends not to work out in their favor.
Yeah, and which is kind of, when you look at how he curates the roster and how he builds it, seems to be year in and year out. It's definitely very veteran-driven. I mean, their top 5 scorers are all seniors. I mean, it's
which seems counteractive to the reality of the situation, because usually if you've got 3 or 4 to 5 year players in your starting lineup, they don't make a lot of mistakes in those big moments. And I don't know if they haven't made mistakes, but they've been outplayed in a lot of those big moments over the last few years. Maybe Tennessee rectifies that situation this year. I'm not certain.
Yeah, me and you both. I think they'll end up still getting that double bye in the SEC tournaments come this offseason. But, I mean, will it be enough to get them deep into March? I don't think so. I think they might be looking at a Sweet 16 exit once again. But moving to the team that just beat Tennessee by 30 points on earlier this week, the Florida Gators. And this is a team a lot of people were skeptical about coming into SEC play. They hadn't really played a lot of people. Their strength of schedule wasn't great. Oh, you telling me you were skeptical about the Gators?
I was very skeptical about this Florida team because, and here's the thing, it may not even be arguably. I think it's the best guard rotation in the SEC. I was worried about their rebounding. I was worried about how they would defend, and they have defended like their hair has been on fire. So I'm shocked at how good this Florida team is. And I think it's a tried and true methodology in March. If you've got a really good guard rotation, you can make a run. And I think they've got the best in the country.
Yeah, and this team, I mean, they play some outstanding offense. But I think their defense is what kind of has jumped off the page at me this year. And I think they're underrated defensively. Obviously, you look at that Kentucky game, and Kentucky put up 106 points on them, but that Kentucky offense is a different story we'll get to in a second. But there's no doubt about it. You're 100% right. That guard rotation is insane, and they've got just a lot of depth that I think when they get this top 2 seed come March, they're going to be an underrated national championship selection. I think, at least.
I agree. I think it comes into also. I don't think you want to double bye in the SEC tournament. And I think that could hurt Tennessee. That's a lot of time without playing a basketball game. I don't think Florida's going to get that double bye, and I think that could help them. I really do. You want to stay in rhythm. You don't want to get hurt. Obviously, you don't want to work yourself too hard, but you want to stay in rhythm, and I think that's what Florida is going to be able to do, and I think it's going to really benefit them come March.
Moving to the Kentucky Wildcats, and this offseason, obviously, in Kentucky was insane. You got Coach Cal taking the job at Arkansas. You've got Mark Pope coming over from BYU, who's obviously we knew at BYU he was a great coach. Didn't really know how well it would translate over into the SEC. Yeah, brought that he did.
That's the thing. It's fun. It's funny to me in this era of the transfer portal, NIL, and everybody. You see a lot of guys harvesting their old roster and bringing it to the new school. Mark Pope didn't do that, which is wild to me. Brought one player to Kentucky, and obviously he has a great game last night, but he's kind of built this roster from scratch, and it's been really fun to watch. They're a very finesse loaded team. They like to shoot the ball. I'm not sure how they're going to look in March because it's oh so physical, and very often these teams like this, and we've seen it with Alabama, these teams that rely heavily on the three ball, don't typically make it all the way. They make it close, but they don't typically get all the way there. And I'm interested to see what this Kentucky team does as we approach March.
Yeah, this is a team. I mean, if their shot is off, like we saw it was against Georgia earlier this week, they're going to fall flat on their face, and they're probably going to lose that game. And I mean, it really felt like Georgia had control of that game for much of it because of that reason. But I mean, if they are hitting, they could beat anybody in the nation. And with that type of strategy offensively, it's tough to win 7 straight games in the NCAA tournament, playing top tier teams almost consistently. But I think this is
once
a
you
team.
get into the 16 and the 32 with that kind of offense, it gets tough.
It gets really
Because
tough.
even if you just have an okay night against a really good defensive team, you still probably lose that game.
Yeah, and this is but I do like the DNA that Mark Pope has instilled there as far as like he brought in a lot of veteran transfers, one of them, of course, being Lamont Butler. We saw him play at San Diego State, and he's somebody I think come March that can hopefully help bring them over the edge because he's played in the national championship game. He's played through 7 games in March. Obviously, they came up short, San Diego State did, in that championship game, but I'm hopeful that he can instill something in that locker room to help them find, like if the going gets tough, they don't keep trying and keep losing, but they can find a way to get something else rolling, maybe get more physical, maybe get to the basket, whatever that case may be. I think that comes through Lamont Butler. I think he's the most important player for them in my eyes.
I can agree with that. Like I said, interested to see the makeup of this Kentucky roster because I think it's going to get back to the old Kentucky basketball where you got a crap ton of seniors and it's not just these one and dones that Cal would bring in. And that's when they won all their games. It's when they were a dominant force. And I think Mark Pope's going to try and get back to that.
Let's get over to our team there in Starkville, as Kentucky, of course, topped them last night. That was an insane ball game. If you haven't had a chance to go back and watch the highlights of that one, you're going to want to check that out. Check out the Alabama-Texas A&M highlights from last night as well, because these 2 games were crazy. But Kentucky, nonetheless, won that one, unfortunately. But Mississippi State, they looked great offensively, aside from maybe their star player, Josh Hubbard. But I don't think there's any worry around Hubbard being one of the best scorers in the SEC, as well as just overall in the nation. I would say one of the best scorers in all of college basketball. He's been a little inconsistent this season, but I mean, he's obviously what opponents game plan for a good reason.
Yeah, and Kanye Clare being out for Mississippi State has been huge, and Riley Kugel getting hurt and banged up last night, I think, truthfully lost them that game. And that's not Riley Kugel's fault. It's just the circumstance because Hubbard, as that game progressed, was being asked to get the team into the offense, make sure everything was set, and then go try and get yours. You can't do both. Hubbard has played really good basketball this season when he's working within the flow of the offense and taking efficient open shots. Wasn't doing that last night. Did not have a lot of high-quality looks. In fact, Mississippi State was down 1 with about a minute 45 to go in that game. Hubbard pulls up for a semi-contested 3-ball off a screen with about 24 seconds left on the shot clock. And I think that was kind of the tell-all and the real dagger for Mississippi State last night.
Yeah, and of course, he was battling foul trouble as well, and so he didn't really get to. I think part of that was not only was it Clary's injury, but Kugel's injury, but also he couldn't settle into a rhythm. I don't think a lot last night. There was not really. I mean, he was out with foul trouble. Checking to see how many minutes he actually ended up playing last night. He still played 29 minutes, but 3 of 11 from 3 is uncharacteristic for him. And Kentucky did a great job game planning for him, and he had 2 turnovers as well, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for Josh Hubbard, that's more than he usually gets. Yeah. So
yeah, it's 2 more than he usually gets.
I think this Mississippi State team you play the way you played last night and lose by 5 to statistically the second best offense in all of college basketball, this team is going to
On
be
that night,
fine.
they were the best offense in college basketball by
Oh,
a mile.
absolutely.
Teams don't shoot 50%
Absolutely.
from three every night.
No, and this Mississippi State team is going to be fine. You've seen a lot of panic on Twitter about them, as usual. But
There's a
no,
lot of
nonetheless,
ball
this Mississippi
knowers out
State team
there.
will be fine. Yeah, they're
A
going to be a
lot of
top
ball
4
knowers
seed.
out there.
I don't leave any doubt they're going to be a top 4 seed come March, and they are a team with an identity something different than we don't normally see. They're a very defensively driven team. They're going to play you extremely physical. They match up really, really well with Auburn. Matchup wise, obviously Auburn a little bit more talented when they're fully healthy, but they've got that same DNA as the Auburn Tigers, which is going to be it's going to serve them well come March, I think.
Yeah, Jans and Pearl build rosters very similarly. I'm excited to see this matchup this week. Obviously, potentially no Janai Broom, and that's upsetting, but I think they could meet again, especially in postseason.
Moving out to College Station, Texas, you've got the Aggies of Texas A&M, who are, I think, underrated, one of the best teams in college basketball. I've been looking for them to prove to me why they're a top 10, top 12 team, and they can consistently do that, even without their star player, Wade Taylor IV. He's been out for a while here. They still were able to come back on the road against Oklahoma, beat them there. They took care of business against Texas, and then last night, Alabama came into College Station and beat them, but it was not easy for Alabama, something that you expect to be a little easier for the Crimson Tide without Wade Taylor. But this A&M team, they're just another great SEC team, and I think they're another top 4 seed come March. You've got 7 of these teams in the SEC that I think could be top 4 seeds. A&M, absolutely one of them.
They got to hit free throws. They got to hit free throws, especially in your home gym. So I think that obviously, I think, killed them against Alabama. They hit the free throws. They may probably win that game. But A&M, obviously, going to be a fixture in the postseason. They've got a really good coach. They've got a really good program and kind of a culture around there. And like you said, not a lot of people think of Texas A&M when they think of high-caliber SEC basketball. But maybe they should. Maybe they should because they're proving it early on.
And we know how good Wade Taylor is. I mean, he is a first-team
Yeah.
All-SEC player year in, year out. It feels like he's been. He's a senior. And, I mean, he didn't play the past 2 games. He's been battling that injury. And so, but when he's healthy, this team is without a doubt one of the best teams in college basketball, I think.
I agree.
Moving on, just slightly north of this team to the Oklahoma Sooners, starting off 0-3 in SEC play. But is it time to press the panic button in Norman? Is it time?
I don't think so. I mean, it's a one-man band. We all know who the best player for Oklahoma is. And he doesn't have a lot of help outside of that. That program fell into a pretty rough spot before moving to the SEC. I think they're clawing their way back. They've got the money to do it. They're going to get some big players in the portal, especially if they can keep, whose name is escaping me right now, around point guard. He's killing it for them. Freshman, yeah. But if they can keep him around, they're going to be able to build around him. I don't think they keep him around, but we'll see.
Yeah, Mr. Jeremiah Fears. I think there's an end that is escaping you there.
Jeremiah Fears. That's a heck of a name. I don't know how I forget that.
Yeah, I mean he's striking fears into the opponents. But
at least he was in non-con. I don't know about conference.
Yeah, but this Oklahoma team got some great wins in non-conference, and thanks to how good the SEC is these days, they're going to be able to get in with a sub 500 SEC record into the NCAA tournaments. Now their ceiling with some of these losses recently is slowly falling on them, but if they get 7 wins in conference, I think that gets them a tournament spot. 8 for sure. 7 is close. 7 might put them last 4 in, but 8 definitely gets them in, and they're 0-3 right now. If they can manage to kind of piddle-paddle their way to 500, and these 3 teams they played, obviously, on the road at Alabama, hosting Texas A&M, and then on the road at Georgia, that's rough. That is very rough. These next 3 games for Oklahoma,
good teams.
Yeah, those are great teams. And the next 3 games, hosting Texas, hosting South Carolina, and then being at Arkansas. they've got a real chance to turn it around here and get right back to 3-3. I think, at least.
I agree. And if they do, like you said, they're almost halfway to that 7-win mark. I do think that's the magic number for them for the tournament. Like you said, it could be a last four in type deal, but I think they get it.
Yeah, and one team whose name we've said a lot here, who has started out SEC play defending home court really well. Obviously, they lost on the road at Ole Miss in their opening game, but the Georgia Bulldogs, I mean, this team, I wasn't expecting them to be nearly as good as they are right now, and they have been.
The Mike White redemption arc is crazy.
It is insane, and he is building an outstanding program here. I think could be great for years to come. And this is not a team that anybody wants to face off with. They've been kind of hanging around that 8-9 seed line. They're going to be a top 6 seed come March Madness. This is a team I wouldn't want to play them. I'll tell you one thing.
They just don't lose games at home. They don't lose home games. They just do not lose at home. The new gym they've got, the new facility is fantastic. They have packed it out every week, and that's tough to win at. And if you win all your home games in SEC, you're probably going to make a pretty good push for the tournament.
Absolutely. And this is, I think, the most underrated SEC team because nobody, nationwide, media-wise, I don't think anybody is giving them any kind of real respect that they have earned when talking about how good the SEC is. But yeah, the Georgia Bulldogs are one to watch. And one team that I'm unsure about has been the school up north that we talk about there. And I think when we refer to that, we refer to the Ole Miss Rebels. I don't know if that's my personal Mississippi State bias with that being unsure about them. But I think this 3-game stretch they have upcoming at Alabama, at Mississippi State, and then hosting Texas A&M is really going to tell me a lot about who they are. If they get 2 of those 3, consider me in. I'm sold on them. That's great. But
Agreed.
Anything less than that,
they got to get 2 out of the 3. 14-2 overall, but they're 3-0 in conference play, and that's a big thing.
That's massive.
To get 3 wins this early on in conference play is huge. As you said, a big one coming up, but I'm not sold on them. I think the physicality in this league may wear down on them over time, but we'll see. Chris Beard's a really good basketball coach, fantastic recruiter. When he was hired by Ole Miss, you said, oh, God, they hired Chris Beard, but he's going to get the program right, and he has.
Yeah, no, they've got good non-conference results as well. Wins over Louisville, win over BYU, a close loss to Purdue, which wasn't bad for the metrics-wise. Big loss to Memphis. I think that one kind of hurt them when you look at those metrics. But these next couple of games will tell us a lot about Ole Miss. Right now they're sitting right around that 6 seed or 7 seed projection mark. And I personally, I don't like the AP poll. I'm not a big fan of the AP poll. Metrics can differentiate depending on where you look. And so I love looking at projected seeding. That's how I differentiate teams based on where they, like if the tournament were to start today, you've got all these people that know what they're talking about, putting them seed-wise. That's how I like to view them personally.
We are big Ken Palm guys.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm a big Ken Palm guy. So
yeah,
I use that a
it.
lot. And Ole Miss is impressive there. I'm intrigued to see how they do as conference play drags on because it is a gauntlet.
Oh, I think I've been looking for a new word. Everybody's saying gauntlet. Gauntlet is a perfect way to describe it. But I need something that's like even tougher than gauntlets because I don't know. We got to come up with a word that's tougher than gauntlet. I don't know what it would be. I almost want to call it.
I'll get back to you on that. I'll get back to you on that.
We're going to. Because the SEC this year is unreal. And even as we get into this bottom half of the conference down here, a lot of these teams are going to be right on the bubble right now where they're sitting. And one of them being the Missouri Tigers, who did a great job defending home court yesterday against Vanderbilt. They did a great job defending home court on Tuesday against LSU. And this is a team, they're 2-1 in SEC play so far. Not the top caliber of opponents yet.
You win 7 or 8 SEC games, you're probably looking at a tournament.
Oh, yeah.
And to get 2 of them this early, you can't complain.
Yeah. Being led by Mark Mitchell, this Missouri team is going to be a tough opponent, tough draw for anybody that gets them first round of the SEC tournament because they're just not going to be a double bye team in my eyes at least, or maybe even a single bye team. They could finish down there, and they're going to be in the bottom half when everything is said and done. But I think teams like Missouri and teams like Vanderbilt go to show you how deep the SEC is because these are teams that typically aren't very, very good. But when we saw the results they were putting up non-conference wise, it was like, oh, okay. That's when people
The
started to
SEC may
realize
be really
how
good.
deep this conference is, because you had your top dogs winning, getting their results. When you have these teams that are usually viewed as being middle of the pack or even below the middle of the pack, putting up the kind of results they did, that's when you knew things were getting wild. I think especially for Missouri, going back, it was the big result over number one Kansas at the time that kind of set everybody off like, whoa. I think that's when everybody was like, wow, this is getting
Missouri can play.
crazy.
No
Yeah,
SEC team has less than 10 wins. That's
insane.
a wild statistic to me.
That I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or there's no way around that. It's like you've beaten 10 college basketball teams at least, and of course that one team with 10 wins is South Carolina, and we'll get to them down the road. Unfortunately for them, they're the bottom of the SEC. Still not bad, but they might be bad.
Meh.
But no, Vanderbilt, they put up terrific non-conference results. I think when looking at this Vanderbilt team coming into SEC play, you kind of had that one loss to Drake that kind of haunted them. Otherwise, they could have gone unscathed in what wasn't necessarily a tough non-conference. But I think we've seen the Mississippi State Bulldogs lose to Drake before, so I don't think anybody wants to underestimate the Drake Bulldogs as far as what they can accomplish out there. But this Vanderbilt team, they've got a great get-right game coming for them on Wednesday in hosting South Carolina, because they're coming off 2 SEC losses. They're kind of trending in the wrong direction right now as far as they are and where they're headed. But I have no shortage of belief in this Vanderbilt basketball team. We saw them play against Mississippi State, and Mississippi State was able to go into Nashville and take them down. But there's no doubt this Vanderbilt team, when healthy, is outstanding.
They can shoot it. They can shoot it point blank. That's going to win them a lot of games. And they defend really well. They defend really hard. They're a physical team. And I think that's going to win them some games here in conference play as well. Again, obviously everybody's got to finish low somewhere. I do think they finish on the bottom side of the SEC, but I think they're building towards something a lot greater.
Moving into these last 4 teams in the SEC, and I think why don't we start with the most interesting one here? And that is the Arkansas Razorbacks. That is the Walmart money-led Arkansas Razorbacks, the Tyson Chicken money-led Arkansas Razorbacks. And you've got Coach Cal coming in from Kentucky, hired him away, paid him a ton of money, gave him essentially unlimited pockets in NIL. And now, I think after their loss yesterday, they're sitting outside the tournament. Is it time to press the panic button in Fayetteville?
They're going to be really good. It's not going to be instant. Arkansas fans wanted instant credibility and instant success, and that's just not possible in this level of college basketball. They'll be fine. They won't be great this year. They'll be back next year with a vengeance, unfortunately. They will blow it in the biggest possible moment because Calipari's their coach, but they'll be back.
And moving on to these bottom 3, LSU, Texas, and South Carolina. Starting with kind of the Tigers of LSU, this is not a tournament team. There's no way around it. I think we'll go ahead and jump to South Carolina as well. This is not a tournament team either.
No.
I don't see them being tournament teams. I don't see them being elite. I think they'll still beat some SEC teams. We almost saw South Carolina get Auburn yesterday, excuse me. But you can't take a night off against them, but they're not going to be – they might be an NIT team, but even with those two, I'm not sure they can be that.
LSU and South Carolina. LSU is in a worse spot than South Carolina. South Carolina's got a good ball coach, Lamont Paris, and they got a really solid roster. However, they missed out on they had some whiffs in the portal, and it's hurt them in their guard rotation. Studi being out's hurting them a lot. I think Lamont Paris is the guy. I don't think they're panicking. They may just have to buckle up and try and revamp for next year. LSU, it's going to be tough.
And capping off this great Southeastern Conference with one of the 2 newest additions, the Texas Longhorns. And this is a team I think people had high hopes for. Obviously led by freshman guard Trey Johnson, kind of homegrown talent there. This Texas team will be fun to watch, I think, next year. But this year, not quite there.
I agree with that sentiment. If they're not fun to watch next year, it's time to hit the panic button. But I think they will be. Like you said, all the money in the world, and they've got a great homegrown product who I think will be there for more than one season. So I'm just got to keep that
Yeah, I
roster
think.
together as much as you can and find one or two pieces, and you're there.
Yeah, they are paying him handsomely to be there, I would imagine. And so they will continue to add talent in the portal because, once again, this is another team in the bottom of the SEC right now that kind of has those unlimited pockets money-wise. So no worries for the Texas program there. I don't have any worries
Them
for the
and
Arkansas
LSU.
program either. Oh, yeah.
LSU
LSU
also
as
with the
well.
bottomless pockets. LSU will have a new coaching staff soon, and they'll probably be fine.
Maybe they should go hire a great guy out of McNeese State. Maybe their coach over there, Mr. Will Wade.
I hear he's won some SEC games before.
I hear he's had some decent success at LSU prior. Wouldn't that be quite the
Well,
reunion?
he's got some ties back to the program.
What kind of ties they are, that's up for you LSU fans to decide. But
You want to win games?
like we can say, whether or not you do it ethically, that's different. But
Bruce Pearl's done it unethically for the last 10 years. So,
yeah, everybody loves Bruce Pearl, including myself. But no, I think this from top to bottom, this SEC team, this not SEC conference, is just loaded. And I think we just went through each team telling you why it's loaded and explaining to you why it's loaded. And so if you are someone that doesn't believe in the SEC, you might want to get your eyes checked after this one because the SEC is the most loaded conference that I've ever seen and we may ever see, unfortunately.
this is true. This is true.
You asked me before we went on if it was a bad thing. This is the greatest conference we may ever see. And I think we'll switch. I think it might be unfortunate because I just want to.
At the age of 24, we're witnessing the best basketball we've ever seen, and I don't know whether to be happy or sad about that.
Yeah, I think I'll stick with it. I think it's great, but I think it's one of those things like, and this might be controversial for our listeners out there, where like at the time you were like, "This is Michael Jordan is the greatest thing we've ever seen. This might be the greatest basketball player we ever watched." And then LeBron James came along, and you were like, "Wow, this is the greatest basketball player we've ever seen."
That's my take.
That's right, everybody.
That's my take.
That's. I'm glad we can align there, at least. So, yes, the SEC is the best we've ever seen, but is it the best we'll ever see? I don't know. Who said the SEC just can't keep getting better?
Gosh, it's hard to imagine if they do. I mean,
But we
trying to
will
think.
be watching the SEC.
The ACC in the 2010s was quite good.
Oh yeah,
Big East in the early 2000s, late 90s, maybe. I don't know if they were this good. I don't know. It's gonna be fun though.
no, the SEC night in and night out. You got to bring your A game, otherwise you will lose. And I think it's a very blatant statement, but it's the truth. And this is what the Southeastern Conference is. And so buckle up as we get closer to March, as we see these bracketologists post their updated brackets, and you're still like, wow, there are still 13 SEC teams projected in the March Madness field. And there's only roughly 34, 36 at-large spots. And you've got the SEC getting almost a third of them, if not over a third of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say
That goes to show you. Yeah, that goes to show you how good this conference is. And so I don't think you need any other reason to be like, wow, this is just unreal, because there's a lot of teams out there that are really good from other good conferences that aren't going to get in because that's how good the SEC is this year.
Does our national champion this year come from the from the SEC, or does the Big East keep rolling?
This is something I've struggled with because I think, arguably, you could argue that the best team in college basketball is the Iowa State Cyclones. I think they're top three, and I love Iowa State.
They're gonna make a run.
They're gonna be. I think they're gonna be a 1 seed when it's all said and done, and they're gonna be really fun to watch. I think something we didn't realize at the time that the game of the year was Iowa State versus Auburn, about a month ago, or maybe a little over a month ago now. That was Those are the best two teams in college basketball, in my eyes at least. And so they might be able to do it, but I don't really think anyone from the Big East is getting it done. I'm not big on UConn this year. It wouldn't surprise me to see the national champion come from the SEC. I like the Florida Gators a lot. I really do. I think we talked about that guard rotation. You made a great point there. And so it wouldn't shock me to see the Florida Gators get it done. But I think if it's not an SEC team, it'll be the Iowa State Cyclones.
You don't think the Rutgers Scarlet Knights can make a run?
Now, if they could get into the tournament, they could make a run. But
they got to get in.
They got to get in. They've got the two of the best players NBA draft talent-wise on that roster. But unfortunately,
the day the one and dones is over. We prayed for times like this.
We did. We prayed to be led by veterans.
Prayed for the one and done years to be over, and here we are.
Unfortunately, it's coming at the time of players playing 5 years at 5 different schools, but
they're playing
I'll take
for 5
it over
years.
the one and done. They're playing for
I'll
5
take
years.
it over the one and done. I'll take just about anything over the one and dones. I hated all of that.
Are you taking the national champion to be an SEC team?
I am. I don't think it's going to
be
be
with Auburn.
Hot take. I don't think it's going to be one of the ones we think. I think we may get a surprise.
You're taking the Mississippi State Bulldogs. That is incredible.
No, I'm not. But I do think it could realistically be in Alabama. I think it could. Maybe Rick Barnes doesn't choke. Maybe it is at Tennessee. I think that obviously it could be Auburn. It could be, but mathematically the possibility lies in the improbable more times than not. It's very, very rarely the one that we have picked to do it. It has been these past 2 years because UConn has been untouchable. They're not untouchable this year. So I think it's really anybody's ball game.
Don't sleep on the Texas A&M Aggies, everybody. Don't sleep on them. That team, when they get Wade Taylor back, they could be a fun one come March. They could be one that goes deep. That's a Final Four. That's a Final Four team, I think.
Could be.
Thinking about teams that it may not, if it's somebody you don't think it could be, and I don't think they'll get a top 4 bye in the SEC. So if it's somebody who's not outside of that top 4, my eyes go towards the Texas A&M Aggies. That's what I think.
I can agree with that. I can agree with that. I think they make a really good run. I think. How many SEC teams do we think make the Elite Eight?
I'll say 3.
Think we get 3 of them? I think we could see 3 to 4.
I'd say, yeah. And I think part of it could be because you're going to have some of them are going to play in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, some are going to knock each other out.
Yeah, and you're going to have some of them play in the Elite Eight. I think right now recently you've had some places you had 5 SEC teams on the top 1 and 2 lines of that. And so those teams would face off in the Elite Eight, but just with the chaos of March and everything in between it. I think 3, maybe 4 Elite Eight teams wouldn't surprise me. I don't think they get less than 3, though.
I don't either. I think 4 is kind of the sweet spot for me just because of exactly how deep it is. And again, if an Oklahoma gets in where, they've won 7 games, they've got true star power that can win some games in March. Same thing with, I think, Mississippi State. I'm not saying they're going to win it, but I think wild things have happened in March. If there was ever a year or a Mississippi State team that could make a very, very deep run, this is it. It's going to be interesting. I'm excited. March is going to be – this whole SEC slate is going to be heartache and heart medication inducing because everybody's just so good.
Oh, absolutely. And if you are somebody who doesn't really tune into college basketball until March, I encourage you to reconsider because this
shame on
across
you.
Division I is across all of Division I, but especially in the SEC, college basketball is peaking right now. It is incredible to watch. You've got it every night of the week.
Be like me and Dave.
You've got
Be like me and Dave. Have no
prioritize-
life outside of college basketball.
And hey, we could not be happier. I'll tell you one thing. With the
I'm
college basketball
happy.
we're getting now,
I am as happy as could be. It doesn't get better.
And so
This is my favorite time of year.
you've got to be like us. And so I encourage you to check it out. Be sure to watch the SEC without a doubt, because this league, it makes me lose sleep at nights with how excited I am to watch the next day of SEC basketball. I'll say that much.
That's fair. That's fair.
But I'd like to thank you all for joining us here on episode 1 of Fast Break Brunch. Shout out to Tanner for that name as well, and shout out to Tanner for being here and joining us. Any last words for our listeners here?
No, not really. I mean, you can find me in all of my basketball / whatever coverage on Twitter, Tanner_Marlar. That's Marlar. Shameless plug there, Dave. Sorry about it.
Hey, got to do it.
yeah.
Got to do it.
Got to do it. Feel free to keep up. It's a wild ride.
Oh, it's going to continue to be a wild ride. Well, thank you all for tuning in to Fast Break Brunch. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning to start your week off right. Thank you for tuning in on Hoops Talk with Dave. That's Tanner Marlar. I'm your host, Dave Smith. Talk to you tomorrow.